All right, guys, can you hear me? Can you hear me over here? TikTok, can you hear me? Can you guys hear me there? Give me some likes if you guys can hear me. Give me some hearts, guys. Make sure you can hear me. Can you hear me? TikTok, can you hear me? Give me some hearts if you guys can hear me, please. Give me some hearts. YouTube, can you hear me? You can hear me? Awesome. What about over here? Facebook, can you hear me? Give me some hearts if you can hear me. TikTok, can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me, please? I need some hearts if you guys can hear me, TikTok. Okay. You can hear me? Okay, awesome, awesome, okay. All right, so we're gonna do some question and answers, all right, guys? So I've gone through and I've gotten some questions from you guys, and I've got them here. I'm gonna go through and try to answer some of these questions for you guys, and you know, maybe we can make something happen there, guys. If you guys like what I'm saying, then please share this, and please tap your screen, because apparently that helps out bringing it, keeping it out on the feed. So so let's see if we can get a few people on. You know, the numbers aren't very good, but we'll do what we can. So I'll break them up regardless. So so again, today I'm going to try to answer some of you guys' questions, okay? So I got a question, how do we nullify these cases, right? I mean, I think it's pretty clear that these cases are all unconstitutional, right? I think that we've gotten there. So, you know, today there are more than 700,000 people currently imprisoned here in America on direct facial constitutional violations because the states did not follow the proper procedures and processes established and codified in the Constitution for the adjudication of crimes. So when the government fails to do what they're obligated to do, constitutionally obligated to do, that is unconstitutional, the outcome. Guys, right will always produce right, but wrong will always produce wrong. Anytime the government acts unlawfully, what it produces is going to be an unlawful outcome, period. There's no way around that. So there are 700,000 people currently in prison here in America on direct facial constitutional. They should not be in prison because there's nothing keeping them there, because the judgments that they have in place are not valid. Now we're going to talk about the judgments in a moment in a different question. But any act unconstitutional at the beginning cannot become constitutional over time or by subsequent legislation. So how do we nullify these cases? Well, they're already nullified, right? Because when government breaches a constitutional obligation, what it produces is an unconstitutional outcome. But you guys, there's two ways basically of being able to address this. One would be through an appeal, which is what's called a claims processing rule, or the jurisdictional rule, which I've attached to. Now, those two things look at two different points in the timeline. The jurisdictional rule looks at the beginning, right? The claims processing or the appeal looks at the end, okay? Those are two different points in the process. Now, if we can show that they didn't have jurisdiction, then what happens then is that what they produce is going to be unconstitutional. Everything from the moment that that court took action when it lacked jurisdiction, what it produces is going to be unlawful. Guys, jurisdictional rules fall under Civil Rule 60B4, okay? Now, Civil Rule 60 deals with the nullification of judgments. So if the question is, how do we nullify these cases? Well, let's go to what Civil Rule Civil Rule 60, see what it has to say about it. Civil Rule 60 deals with the nullification or voiding of judgments. Civil Rule 60B4 says that a judgment is either valid or void. It can't be anything else. It's either valid or it's void. Guys, the only time that a judgment is void is if the court rendering the decision lacks either subject matter jurisdiction or personal jurisdiction. If it lacks either one of those two things, it is a void judgment. But that's the only time that it's void. The rest of them are not void judgments; they're valid. And now you're going to have to challenge the judgment. You're going to have to go through claims processing. We don't want to do that, because if we go through claims processing relief, if we do an appeal, we'll give them a second chance to be able to do it. If the judgment's void, they're done. They're always in forever barred from ever being able to prosecute you on those particular crimes again under the double jeopardy clause. This is where double jeopardy comes into play. All right. So we've got two different timelines, right? We've got two different points that we can look at. We can look at the beginning, or we can look at the end. If you're looking at the end, you got to do an appeal, right? But you guys, this is one of the things that I keep on telling you. If an attorney tells you to go and appeal it, and we know that that attorney is a criminal, then why are you going to do what the criminal says, right? Why are you going to do that? I'm not an attorney. I'm an advocate. I have a different law degree from what an attorney has. Right? Attorneys go through adjudicative law. I went through substantive law. Those are two different tracks of law. I deal with law enforcement. I deal with criminality. They deal with adjudication. So that's a good point though. What you asked there, because guys, we got to be honest about what an attorney is. We got to be honest, okay? Because an attorney learns what is called adjudicative law. They learn about the adjudication process, the process to make a person into a criminal. That's what they're in the business of. They're in the business of removing freedom. So all the laws that they use are all laws that remove freedom. And just like I said on a video this morning, our Constitution of the United States, our Constitution is designed to guarantee freedom. So all laws that remove freedom would be unconstitutional, wouldn't they? They'd be contrary to the particular purpose or fundamental principles of the Constitution itself. That's why I say that any law that's not Constitution is unconstitutional, simply by virtue of the fact that it's not Constitution, right? So what I do is I look at the criminality, and I deal with the crime. And that's why I'm so focused on the crimes being committed by government. Because if government is acting unlawfully, what they produce is going to be unlawful, right? I used to be on this side, guys. I used to fight against you. I used to fight for government. I know all their secrets. And now I told them a number of years ago that they either step up and tell the people the truth, or I'm going to help them do it. But it's going to be their choice, right? And destruction is going to be on their hands. I told them that they're going to force my hand into action that I believe will be more destructive than constructive, but they're going to have only themselves to blame for what happens, right? This is what happens when the weapons of truth fall upon them, right? This is the truth. And the truth is that what they're doing is unlawful, right? And if government is acting unlawfully, then that means that whatever they produce is going to be unlawful. Guys, what I'm doing more than anything else is I'm drawing a line on the sand, okay? Because I can't keep them from exercising their power, right? They're going to do it or they're not going to do it. I can't keep them from doing something, right? But I can show them that should they choose to exercise their power without lawful authority, then what they're going to produce is going to be unlawful. It's going to be crime. And anytime government commits a crime in the pursuance of an outcome, what they produce is going to be unlawful. It's going to be criminal. And so as we draw the line in the sand here, right, and we say, this is what the law states, you guys are clearly operating outside of it. And as a result, what you're producing is unlawful. You cannot have a lawful outcome derived from an unlawful act, right? And we can show them that they're acting unlawfully. So again, the appeal versus jurisdiction. Now, what is jurisdiction? Jurisdiction is the authority for a court to be a court, right? Jurisdiction derives from the Constitution, okay? So we, the people, in our sovereignty, created the Constitution. The Constitution then created the jurisdiction. The jurisdiction then created the court, and the court then created the court's agent. So the lowest person on the totem pole is the judge. The highest is the person, us, right? We, the people, we are the highest, because we, in our sovereignty, created the Constitution, which created that which could prosecute. So jurisdiction is a creation of the Constitution, and then a creation of jurisdiction is the court, and a creation of the court is the court's agent. So that which is created cannot be above the creator. This is a matter of creation, right? So that agent of the court cannot say that they're above us, the people, because they're a creation of a creation of a creation that we created in our sovereignty. So everything's upside down, right? But that also means that a court cannot act without having jurisdiction. Because if it acts without jurisdiction, it's breaking the law. It has no authority to be able to act. That's why, a judge doesn't have the authority to say to you, oh, well, I create jurisdiction or I take jurisdiction, because you don't have authority to do that. Because before you can be an agent of the court, that court must have jurisdiction. And if that court does not have jurisdiction, anything that court does, including creating an agent, would be unlawful, right? So you guys are going to step up a little bit higher from just the agent. The agent has no existence, because if the agent is acting without jurisdiction, that's because the agent's master, the court, is acting without jurisdiction. And if the court is acting without jurisdiction, everything it does is unconstitutional. That's why yesterday, in one of the videos that I did, I said that the first duty to the judge is to jurisdiction. Because the court cannot be a court. It can't call anyone into that room without first having jurisdiction. And if it lacks jurisdiction, according to Civil Rule 60b-4, if a court acts without subject matter or personal jurisdiction, what it produces is void, wholly without force or effect on the parties involved in the dispute. So in order for a court to render a legally binding decision, it must have two things. It must have subject matter jurisdiction, and it must have personal jurisdiction. If the court lacks either one of those two things, what it produces is void under Civil Rule 60b-4, okay? Void, because a judgment is either valid or void. It's valid in all instances except for when the court rendering decision lacks either subject matter jurisdiction or personal jurisdiction, okay? So if a court acts without jurisdiction, then it would be void. Whatever it does, whatever the court produces, is always going to be unlawful, unconstitutional, and not valid in the parties involved in dispute. Facebook, you're about to lose connection. Someone tried to call in right there. 1 second, and I'll reconnect to you guys. So in order for a court to render a legally binding decision, it must have two things. It must have subject matter jurisdiction, and it must have personal jurisdiction. If it lacks either one of those two things, what it produces is completely void. Subject matter jurisdiction is the right to oversee the type of case that's brought before it, okay? So in the case of a death, for instance, you would not bring that to a small claims court, because they would not have subject matter jurisdiction to oversee the type of case that's brought before it, right? You would bring that case to a probate court. That would be the court that would have the authority to oversee the disposition of deceased assets, okay? So in the case of a death, you would bring it to probate court. That would be the court that would have subject matter jurisdiction. A small claims court would not, okay? Now the second thing that it must have is it must have personal jurisdiction, which is the right to oversee the parties involved in the dispute, okay? So for instance, when the Constitution says, in all cases in which a state shall be party, the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction, then that means that the court that must act first if a state is a party is the United States Supreme Court. No other court in the country can act before the Supreme Court, because the Constitution has created the obligation for the Supreme Court to hear all cases originally in which the state is a party. That's also the reason why in Martin versus Hunter's Lessee, the case from the Supreme Court from 1811, it says that it is not the case, or it's not the court that grants jurisdiction to the Supreme Court, but rather the case. So when they say to you, oh, you need to go back and exhaust remedies with the state, you got to go back and get a decision from the highest court in the state before you can bring it into the federal court, you're going to say, oh no, that's not true, because in all cases in which a state shall be party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. Therefore, it is not the court that grants jurisdiction to the Supreme Court, but rather the case. Because if a state is a party in the case, then the only court that has jurisdiction, therefore the only court with personal jurisdiction, if a state is named a party, is the United States Supreme Court. No other court in the country has jurisdiction, personal jurisdiction, right? So what that means is that when you walk into that courtroom, and they say, oh, well, you just subjected yourself to the jurisdiction of the state's court. No, you didn't, because jurisdiction exists before you walk into that courtroom. It exists before. That court cannot be a court unless it has personal jurisdiction. And if the Constitution says that only the Supreme Court has jurisdiction, because they're original, if they're the court that has jurisdiction, then that means that anything that the state does, anything at all, whether it's removing your children, whether it's TPRing you, whether it's adopting your children, whether it's locking you up, whether it's arresting you, if that court lacks jurisdiction, then nothing that court produces is valid, and it doesn't matter how long it is or how many times it's been done. It doesn't matter if there's subsequent legislation. Any act unconstitutional at the beginning cannot become constitutional over time or by subsequent legislation. Okay. So with regard to nullifying these cases, the cases are already nullified. They're already void. Because you guys, all of your cases are state of whatever versus you. The state was named a party. A state may not be both accuser and judge in the same case. James Madison said that. And we know that Justice Gorsuch right now, one of the Supreme Court justices, we know that Justice Gorsuch, he says that James Madison is the authority with regard to the Constitution. They go to him to determine original textualist intent. We have a textualist court. 6 of the 9 justices are original textualists on this court. This is the time to bring this case forward, because these people say that they believe in the original intent of that Constitution. And now we're going to put them to the test. Are you a liar or are you telling the truth? You see, these justices, I believe that they want to hear this case. I believe that they're ready to get this monkey off their back, because they've been lying for an awful long time to the people of the United States. They've been covering up an awful lot of bullshit that they've been doing, and I think that they're ready to tell the truth. And the reality is that we only need one justice to agree with that. We only need one justice to decide that he wants to save his own life and his own reputation and his own honor. We only need one justice, and it doesn't matter who it is. If any one of the justices on the United States Supreme Court decide that they want to act honorably, if they want to obey the law, if they want to fulfill their duties and obligations and promises that they made to the people of the United States, if any one of them decides that, then we're done. We won. And the truth is that we already got that with Justice Gorsuch, because he already stated in his book, Overruled, that we're right. He already stated in his judicial notice on November 11th of 2023 that we're right, okay? So we've already got one of them that has stated publicly that we're right. We're just trying to do this in the least destructive manner now, right? We're just trying to get them to concede at this point in time. We're trying to bring the pressure up to them and say, you know what, guys? You either address this, or you're going to be exposed for exactly what you are. So you guys either come to terms with the truth here, and if you don't want to come to terms with the truth, then guess what? You're going to have a long neck, Mr. Thomas. You're going to have a really long neck, Miss Jackson Brown. You're going to have a really long neck, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Alito, Mr. Kavanaugh, Miss Sotomayor. You're all going to have very long necks, because you're going to be the very first people that are going to be going to the gallows, because you guys are the ones that have created the treason and the environment where treason can be committed because of your rulings that you made. Your despicable predecessors, you were part of that organization, and if the rulings were made in a treasonous manner to fundamentally change the Constitution of the United States by slave owners, then guess what, man? It's your job to step up and correct that, and if you don't, you are a member of the criminal conspiracy that is undermining the laws of the United States because of the despicable predecessors that you tell us we have to call honorable, but there's no honor in them. Of the first 28 justices that served on the United States Supreme Court, 22 of them owned their own slaves. And then we wonder why the slavery institution exists today, because the foundation is the slavery institution, the preservation of it, right? We know that, we can see it, there's no denying it, all right? Someone just asked me a question about Doge. Guys, Doge is not behind this. Doge is worried about money, right? This isn't about money. This is the problem. This is what a lot of people are failing to grasp here, is that the money is about the business. If you guys want to talk about the corporation, you want to say, oh, well, government's a corporation. What does the corporation care about? The corporation cares about money, right? Well, unfortunately, if you run government as though it's a business, then the decisions that are being made are going to be what is in the best fiscal interest of the country, not what is in the best societal interest of the country. And laws and decisions are going to be made on how to make money. And that, unfortunately, was what Doge is worried about, right? I could give a shit about the money because the money is worthless anyway. It has no value. So why would I waste any time worrying about money? Because money has to do with the business. You guys want to complain about the corporation? You guys want to complain about how it's a business? Then fucking quit worrying about the money, because the money is worthless, you guys. I'm worried about the people and what the people need, and the people need something other than money. That's not what we need. We need our rights protected. We need our families protected, and we need government to stop acting unlawfully in violation of the laws. And the laws have nothing to do with money, right? They have nothing to do with money, right? So Doge, yes, I've contacted. In fact, I've had discussions with Mr. Trump 3 separate occasions. Right? I had a discussion with Cash. They're not behind this because they're worried about a business. All right, they're worried about money. That's what their focus is on. And I'm trying to get them to understand that government is not a business. We're not going to run it as though it's a business anymore. We're done with the business because the business clearly is not serving its consumer, right? The people of the United States. I want the people to have their rights, and that's what I'm focused on. So no, Doge is not the answer to this question because Doge worries about the money. And guess what? It's not financially advantageous for them to shut down this business, right? Because if I get my way, government doesn't have business anymore. They don't have the money. They don't have the revenue. They're not generating money. And so that's why, those questions like that, they don't get us going in the right direction, guys. They don't do it, okay? Money is not the problem. I love that we're focused on that because I do think that it's very, very important that we understand the fraudulent nature of these criminals that are leading us. But nonetheless, the money should not be what we should be worrying about right now. What we should be worrying about is how do we get that Constitution back in its foundation? And that starts with 2 things. One, we remove all the bullshit that the executive branch put into place, their policy, right? That they went out and enforced it, altered, amended the law, right? That's issue number 1. Issue number 2 is we got to remove all the bullshit that the judges put in place that they erroneously called law when the judicial branch has no authority to create law. They create rulings. Rulings must be consistent with what the law says because judges are tethered to positive law. And when they create rulings and then they erroneously call it law and they tell the whole country to follow their law, well, unfortunately, judges, you don't create law. So what you did was unconstitutional. What you put at the foundation is unconstitutional. Judges don't create law. Case law is bullshit. There is no such thing as case law in American jurisprudence because here in America, we didn't delegate the authority for judges to create law. That was one that we reserved to the people through the legislative branch, Clause 1, Article 1, all legislative powers vested in a Congress of the United States, okay? So, issue number 1, how do we nullify these cases? They're already nullified. They're already done, right? There is nothing keeping any of these people in prison as of this moment because remember, no one has to obey an unconstitutional order. No one has to obey an unconstitutional judgment. No one has to obey an unconstitutional law. Every single person that is sitting in prison right now today is sitting there because a government decided that they were going to go against the Constitution of the United States and proliferate a business. There is nothing keeping them there but a bunch of goons with guns, okay? Nothing. And when these people wake up and they realize that nothing is keeping them in that enslaved state, I wonder what these goons are going to do then. Because there's 40,000 judges across this country. What are those 40,000 judges going to do when 330 million Americans wake up and realize that 40,000 people are destroying that which we love, that which we believe in, and the one thing that makes America, America? They're destroying it. The only thing that their institution was instituted to preserve, protect, and defend, they're destroying it. What are the people going to do when they wake up and they realize this, and then realize that it's only 40,000 judges that are profiting off of these illegal acts, right? It's a despicable, disgusting institution, and we've got to get it corrected because there's nothing keeping those people in that enslaved state other than the slaves waking up and realizing, I don't want to be a slave anymore, and walking the fuck out of there lawfully because there's nothing lawfully keeping them there but a bunch of goons with guns. These judgments are already void. They're already nullified, okay? They're already void. And that's why I want the institution to understand the situation that they are in right now. Because of their unconstitutional and criminal conduct, there is no guilt, right? Even Scripture says that the man of lawlessness, where there is lawlessness, there cannot be guilt. And where our government has acted outside of the law, there cannot be guilt because guilt is a process that's codified in the law. And if you don't follow the process, government, what you produce is unlawful, okay? And now there are 2.9 million people sitting in prison today unlawfully, okay? So this is a train wreck that I want them to wake up to because if they don't, then there's going to be some significant issues that our nation might face that's going to be much more dangerous than it needs to be. I don't want dangerous people out on the street. But government, if you're not willing to wake up and address the things that you did, right? Your criminal conduct, your unlawful acts, if you're not willing to acknowledge that, and you're going to ignore it, then this situation is going to get much more dangerous for the people of the United States than it has to be. Don't say to me that this is too big of a deal, government, because you caused this. You did this. It was your criminality that's put us into the situation that we're in today. So I would suggest that you come up with a solution to this societal problem. Because that's all it is. It's just a problem. It's a societal problem. And government, if you can't come up with a solution to a societal problem that you created, then maybe you guys are in the wrong job, right? Maybe we don't need that government anymore, because maybe that government is not serving the people of the United States. So, Abraham Lincoln said, it's long been a grave question whether any government not too strong for liberties of its people could be strong enough to maintain its own existence in grave emergencies. We're in the middle of a grave emergency right now. We're seeing a dissolution of this nation as a result of what you've done, government. This is your action. You caused this. It doesn't matter how big it is or how long it's been done. You did this because you didn't understand the laws, judges, because you just decided to go along with the rest of the herd that unfortunately acted criminally from the very beginning. So they can't say to us, this is too big of a deal to fix, because they did this. This is their fault. So I don't want dangerous people out walking the street. But that could very well be what happens, because when the people are placed into a state of enslavement, even according to Thomas Jefferson, to Jacques Rousseau, to John Locke, all of the founding philosophers of our philosophy of government, all of them said that when government reduces the people into a state of slavery, that the people have the right to take back their liberty and restore their original rights. These people have there's nothing keeping them there in prison. But if they are a danger to society, we should identify that. So government, what you need to be doing right now is not worrying so much about where the fuck the money went, but maybe worrying about how we're going to solve this problem that you created, right? Don't just create the diversions. Don't just say, oh, well, we'll give you $5,000 back on your taxes, because that's not going to solve this fucking problem that you created, government. It's not going to do it. I want government to step up, and I want to do an analysis, immediate analysis, on every single person that they currently have in prison. And if that person is not a risk to society, I want those people back home to their fucking families, because you have no authority to keep someone there just simply so you can profit off of their forced involuntary servitude, so you can profit off of your illegal acts. We're not going to permit that anymore, government. So these people, there's nothing keeping them there on the criminal side. Nothing. There is no judgment that exists. None. Because if the unlawful, unconstitutional act occurred before the judgment was put into place, i.e. you didn't have jurisdiction to do it, then what you produced is unconstitutional. There's nothing there. That's why we're going to the beginning, and we are challenging the unlawful detainment, the unlawful arrest by a court that had no authority to order your arrest. And that's what we're doing. We're doing it from the beginning. That's why we're using a habeas corpus. Don't fucking worry about your appeals. Guys, save your damn money. Stop giving it to these attorneys. An appeal's not going to get you anywhere. We go to the beginning, because if they didn't have jurisdiction from the very beginning, because Article 3 says that no state can be both accuser and party, then you know what? Stop paying attorneys $50,000 so that they can go and lose an appeal for you, because you only got about a 2% chance of winning an appeal, right? What I'm doing, this is, from a risk perspective, this is far less risky than doing an appeal, right? Because at least what I'm doing is founded on law. At least what I'm doing is upheld by multiple courts and is constitutionally codified, right? I would rely upon the Constitution, the actual words of the Constitution, much more than I would rely on the very people that put you into that institution, attorneys, right? Because all they know how to do is make a person into a criminal, because that's all they've been trained to do. They only know the laws that imprison and enslave people. That's why they use judge-made rulings, right? That's why they don't use the Constitution. How many of you had a constitutional argument presented in a court that was seeking to remove your constitutional rights? Not one, because you relied upon an attorney who doesn't know the Constitution, because all they've been trained is how to make a person into a criminal, which is contrary to the Constitution, contrary to constitutionalism. So don't go to an attorney anymore. Stop relying upon them, guys. Send me $5. Save the other $49,000, right? Don't spend $50,000 in an appeal, because an appeal is not going to get you there. Which brings us to another question here, right? Right, guys. The size of this it's indicative of winning this. Okay, so The question was, how can a person go about dealing with this issue? Guys, you're not going to deal with this individually. Individually, you're not going to win, right? Because individually, you're going to be going up against the court that says, oh, I've got jurisdiction. We have to fight from the top. We have to go to the court that does have jurisdiction. We got to hold them accountable for their actions. That's what we have to do. Have to do that, right? That's why these affidavits are not for you to take into your court so that you can ask your judge and tell your judge he's committed crime. Because just as the Attorney General of the state of Rhode Island said that he's aware that what they're doing is unconstitutional, but they're going to continue to do it until directed to do otherwise, right? We have at least 3 attorney generals that have made very, very similar statements to that, yeah, they know that they're acting unconstitutionally, but they don't care. They're going to continue to do it because they're being permitted to do it. Well, who's permitting them to do it? The Supreme Court of the United States. That's why we have to deal with them. So what you guys are doing is you're not fighting individually, because we can't win individually. There's too many fights out there. But what we can do is we can win collectively. Because when 2.9 million people come together on one single issue, talking about jurisdiction, like, hey, state, you don't have the authority to call me in. You don't have the authority to pull me over and ask me for my license. You don't have the authority to take away my kids or to remove my freedom through a guardianship. You don't have authority to do that, state, right? Because that's contrary to the Constitution. When we get all those people coming together to the first issue, to the base issue, and we talk about it, then they can't shut it up anymore. It's the power of the numbers, right? That's where we win. You don't win going into your own court challenging that judge because the judge has too much power. We got to go to the judge's boss's boss. We go to the highest court. We're already there. All you got to do is put your faith behind me. Because again, standing behind me, I have 2.9 million prisoners who are all people who are sitting there on no judgments whatsoever. That's the power behind me. If they get behind me and push me and push me into a court by talking about the issue that I'm bringing up here, jurisdiction, then we have a massive amount of power, because standing in front of me is a Supreme Court who's a criminal who is protected by 40,000 traitors, right? Who do you think's going to win this war, huh? 2.9 million people whose rights and freedoms have been robbed from them by 40,000 traitors standing in front of me. Who's going to win? The power's on our side, but the power has to be exercised properly. You guys need to put the power together into me. We've got to do that. That's what has to happen, okay? And once you guys do that, once you guys get behind me and you say, you know what? I have that same problem too. That state didn't have authority to bring an accusation against me because that state isn't a person, right? Well, guess what? That's the jurisdictional issue. That's what I'm talking about right here. So if you guys come together and you talk about this issue and you don't fight it from your own level, you get behind me, guys, I'm gonna win. We're gonna win this all day long. They won't stand a chance against this argument that we have. But we have one criminal that stands in front of us who is being protected by 40,000 traitors. That's all we gotta overcome. And if you guys come together and you say, you know what, he's right, the court didn't have jurisdiction, I'm not sitting in this prison on a valid judgment because there's nothing to appeal, because you don't appeal something that doesn't exist. If it's void, there's nothing to appeal. Read it, guys. If it's void ab initio, you don't have to do anything, nothing, because it's void. So why would you appeal a void judgment? It's void, void. And if it's void, then that means you're unlawfully detained. You were unlawfully arrested. And why were you unlawfully arrested? Because the court didn't have authority to be able to be a court, because the state cannot be both accuser and judge. Right? So we can do this. We can do this, but we have to come together and we have to say who is responsible for this issue. The Supreme Court of the United States is responsible. Because the Supreme Court of the United States had a jurisdictional or a constitutional obligation that existed, that they were to oversee any dispute in which the state was a party, and they didn't do it. They failed to do it. And by their breach of constitutional obligation, all of you are now sitting in prison on a void judgment. So you can talk about the irregularities in the evidentiary procedures. You can talk about your biased judge. You can talk about the lies of the prosecutor, or you can say all of that is secondary to the primary issue of Supreme Court of the United States. Why didn't you do your job as constitutionally obligated? And all of us can talk about that one issue. All of us. We can all come together, okay? So we can do a class action, but we don't need to, because we have a class action habeas, right? Class action habeas. A habeas corpus challenges the validity of a detainment, the validity of an arrest. If you are unlawfully imprisoned, you use a habeas corpus to challenge that detainment, okay? And you can class together habeas corpuses. We've already asked for it under Rule 23 of the USCIS Rules of Civil Procedure. We've already asked the Supreme Court to authorize the application of class action device in this proceeding. The lawsuit comes afterwards. Right now, we want to say, you know what? Why are these people sitting in prison? Because they shouldn't be there. None of them should be there because court, you didn't have authority to be able to do it. Now we secure a mass release of people, right? And through the mass release, we get enough attention on an issue that then we can bring a lawsuit forward, because your rights are not violated until we show that someone had a duty. And who had that duty to act? Supreme Court of the United States. Supreme Court of the United States, you're a bunch of fucking criminals. You haven't done your job. You breached the constitutional obligation. We're coming after you, right? And that's the only court we have to come after because, again, Alexander the Great, he had a philosophy. He said that an army of lions and bears led by a sheep will be defeated by an army of sheep led by a lion. Guys, those prosecutors and judges, they're lions and bears. They're tough, right? There's a whole army of them, but they're protecting a sheep, right? Because that Supreme Court of the United States is nothing but a criminal. So we may be an army of sheep. We're weak, powerless, we don't have guns or anything else, but you know what? If you rally behind the strength of a lion, right, then all I have to do is take down their leadership, the Supreme Court of the United States. You guys can push me into that fight. We can draw them out, and when we do, when we draw that Supreme Court out from its protection of the lions and bears, all I can do is take it down, and their whole army will fall. This is the David versus Goliath, right? There was one single giant that everyone was afraid to fight because he was a giant, Goliath. But you know what? That weak little guy, David came up, he said, you know what? I have faith, I believe in that one stone, and I'm going to go and throw it, and I'm going to let God land it. Guys, I have one stone. It's the bedrock of this nation. That's the only stone I'm using. It's the only stone I need, and I will take down that giant. And when I do, the whole army of lions and bears will fall. They don't have power without their leadership. You let me take down that sheep that leads that army, and the whole army's going to fall. You guys don't got to worry about fighting them individually. Let me do the fighting for you, right? I will take on the Supreme Court of the United States. I will take on that sheep, and when I take on that sheep, I have one stone that will take it down. The bedrock of this nation, that's the only stone I need, and that stone will absolutely take that giant down. Let me do it. That's all I have to do. One fight. None of you have to fight. Let me do the fighting for you. I will take down their sheep, and when I do, their army will fall. It will no longer have power the moment we take down their leadership, the Supreme Court of the United States. So let me do that. Get me the affidavits, right? I need them. That's all I need to finish this. God says 500,000 is going to be enough. Get me the 500,000. Share it with whoever. But that's all I need. You guys are going to push me into that court, and I'm going to fight for you. And when I do, we will take down their leadership, and the whole army will fall. That's why I say I will send help down from above. You guys will be empowered with exactly what you need to win your fights individually out of the edge. And all you got to do is rally behind me and talk about the issue that I'm saying. None of you is lawfully arrested as of this moment. Not one of you. Every single one of you are currently unlawfully, unconstitutionally imprisoned on void judgments. Let's get you back home, okay? And that's why this message right now, I want to say to government, right? Because government's watching this, guys. They've been watching my stuff, and you can see that by the numbers, because I've got 5,000 views on a video, but only 100 likes, right? That's indicative of the government's watching the videos, right? They're watching it because obviously they're not going to like the videos, but there's a lot of people that are watching these videos right now. And so we know what they're watching. I know that I've got FBI and Secret Service dossiers on me. Great, awesome. That means you're watching my videos. And if you're watching my videos, then you know the power of the case that we have against you. You know that you're going to lose. So what I'm going to say to you right now, government, is I want you to do an assessment. I want you to look at these people and figure out who is a danger. Do that now, because if you don't, then we could have our public in a much more dangerous situation than they need to be, because there are dangerous people that are in prison. But you better figure out who they are, you better do an assessment, and you better start getting out those people that are not a danger to society. All the drug offenses, all the property offenses, all the marijuana offenses, get them back home to their fucking families right away, because if you don't, then you're going to be looking at a much, much worse situation, and you're going to be the one putting the public in danger, not us, because all we're doing is we're saying you have an obligation, government, and you better fulfill that obligation. So if there is a danger to society, if we do have people that are a danger that we need to protect from society, you're not going to hold them there because they're slaves. You're going to hold them there on a civil incapacitation, because their judgments are void, right? They're unconstitutional. And if you broke the Constitution, if you broke the law to put them in prison, then they are still there unlawfully. So you better figure out how to make it lawful. And how you make it lawful is you're going to transfer them from a criminal incapacitation into a civil incapacitation. And you're going to start healing them from the trauma that's been inflicted upon them. And if you cannot do this, government, if you can't figure out how to make this happen, then you're going to be causing a very, very dangerous situation towards society, and you're going to be responsible for it. You're going to have to answer to the public when all these people are walking out of that prison, because they realize that those goons with guns can't hold them there, because there is nothing keeping them in that place, right? So I want you to step up right now, right? Not Doge, right? We don't give a fuck about your money. You're going to step up and you're going to start doing assessment immediately, and you're going to start figuring this out. You can do it under the radar, I don't care, but you better start figuring out who's a danger, right? Because if you don't, you're going to be responsible for the public being placed into danger. You're going to be the reason why the public is going to be in danger, because these people have nothing holding them there. There's nothing keeping them there other than your goons with guns. And if these people wake up and they decide that they want to walk out of there, I suggest that you step aside and let them walk out. Because if you don't, just be aware that you're on notice right now that you will be murdering someone without lawful authority, right? And we will hold you accountable for those murder, Mr. Goons with Guns, okay? So if the convictions are unconstitutional and those people decide that they no longer want to be your slaves, then you better step aside and let them walk out of that fucking prison, right? Because if you don't, you will be held accountable for whatever criminal acts that you commit and whatever violence you commit against someone that has no obligation to remain there, okay? So government, you better start doing an assessment right away, immediately, okay? You better figure out who is a danger, and you better start figuring out how you're going to shift them from a criminal incapacitation into a civil incapacitation. And that means that you're not going to hold them in a prison. You're going to bring them into a hospital, okay? All right? And so there's going to be very, very finite numbers here, but this is what you're going to have to do, right? If you want to fix this problem. And if you don't want to fix this problem, then you let this train continue to move forward. And I guarantee you that by the time I'm done, every single one of you will be hanging from those gallows. Every single fucking one of you. Because you're the traitors to the nation. Because there's one thing you were supposed to do, and that was protect, preserve, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and you clearly have chosen not to do it, either willfully or negligently. It doesn't matter. When it comes to treason, that is, it doesn't matter whether you intended to do it or not. If you had an obligation, you failed to fulfill the obligation, despite making a promise and oath that you would, you have committed the crime of treason. Okay? So, right there. I'm not at 100,000 people because government decides to hold me down. This message doesn't get out. Look, I've got 37 people on this. I've got 3 people on Facebook. I've got 5 people on YouTube, right? So, but we know that this is working, you guys. We know it. We know it's working because Chevron was reversed because of the work I'm doing. I don't care what anybody says. I wasn't the one that produced the paperwork, but I was the one that produced the pressure that forced the government to have to do that. Because that was them blaming the executive branch, that was the judicial branch blaming the executive branch for this issue and saying, oh no, you don't get to bring the incorrect charging instrument, you don't get to write policy, right? I brought the pressure to make that case happen, right? That was what I did, okay? Now, same thing with the DOJ memo. The DOJ memo was just the reversal. That was the executive branch saying to the judicial branch, oh no, you guys can't tell us that we can break the Constitution. Guys, that's what this is happening. We see at the highest level of government, we see these branches of government pitted against each other right now, and you know what? That's because of the pressure that we're bringing under these issues. Because you know what? Someone's going to fall for this. Someone's going to be held accountable for this, and they're trying to figure out who it's going to be, right? So there is a mass level of jockeying that's happening. And we know that that's happening because did Chevron actually solve anything? Did the executive branch stop writing policy? No. No, all it was a show. All it was words to you guys telling you, okay, we know that this is happening, but we're going to blame these guys over here. But we're not going to change anything because we're making too much money, right? And then the DOJ memo, has it changed anything? Are these judges still making decisions that are unconstitutional despite the fact that they're hearings officers and ALJs? Absolutely not. It hasn't changed anything. All it is words from the executive branch saying, okay, we're aware of this and we're going to blame all them. That's all that's happening, you guys. Words and actions are not aligning. All that they're doing is they're simply making words, but their actions are inconsistent with those words. But the fact that we got the words is 90% of the battle. Because once you admit that you're aware of criminal activity happening and you fail to do something about it, you're implicated in it. And you know what? We got every single judge across the country implicated because of Chevron. We got every single executive officer implicated because of the DOJ memo. And so now we have a massive step here that we can take to hold these people accountable because we got their own words saying that they're aware that this is happening, guys. So what we're doing is working. It's 100% working. Don't think that it isn't, right? You just got to step back and you got to look at the bigger picture. You got to look at their actions and their words and see that, you know what? Their words say that they are aware that they're criminals, but their actions are saying, oh, but we don't want to fix this problem because we're making too much money, right? So we got to figure out a way to make it more expensive for them to continue to break the law than it is for them to not break the law. And we're getting there, guys, right? This is winning. It's working, all right? So a couple other questions here. Is the affidavit for felony charges? It is. It's only for felony charges. The affidavit is only for felony charges, but we're going to be arguing for misdemeanors when we get there. Because the indictment issue is, an indictment is only required for capital or infamous crimes. A capital crime is any crime punishable by a death. An infamous crime is any crime punishable by more than 1 year imprisonment in penitentiary. Okay? So yes, this affidavit is only for infamous crimes. It's only for felonies. But the argument that we have has to do with Article 3 and whether or not a state can be a judge in a case in which the state itself is a party. And they can't. That's what the argument's going to be. And that's going to be for all of you on misdemeanors, but that's also going to be for all of you with CPS cases because the state brought an accusation through the CPS agent, right? And now that same body of men representing the state cannot be judged, okay? So all your CPS cases, all your child cases, all the guardianship cases, all of them will be included within the Article 3 argument, but we have to bring up an enumerated issue, an enumerated constitutional issue, and we got that through the indictment. That's why we're using the indictment and these affidavits for the indictments as the main issue to get heard, but the argument is going to be much bigger than simply felons, all right? It's going to be, can a state be a judge in a case in which the state itself is a party? And the answer is absolutely not. Because Supreme Court, you had an obligation to oversee those cases and you didn't do it. So Supreme Court, you're the criminal. We're coming after you for your criminal acts because you haven't done what the Constitution requires you to do. So we only have to beat one court, and 9 criminals, 9 justices who have to maintain their honor in order to continue to do this. Guys, you talk about how dangerous it is what I'm doing. Guys, what I'm doing is not dangerous because they can't do anything to me. Because if they did, they would bring attention to this issue. They can't arrest me because if they arrest me, then that would mean that they have heard the issue. And if they've heard the issue, they have to address it. That's why they're ignoring me. That's why I can walk around this country and hold press conferences on the steps of every Capitol, inviting them to come out. They won't come out because they can't hear the issue. If they hear the issue, they have to address the issue, which means that I'm protected by the truth, right? The truth is keeping me protected because if the public hears about the truth, that means that they will have heard it. And if they've heard it, then guess what? They have to address it. That's why they ignore me. And that's why I'm able to do the things I'm doing. That's why they can't do anything about it because they know that this is the truth. And if this is the truth, they can't bring attention to that truth because if they arrest me for the things I'm saying, then that means that they will have heard the truth. And if they heard the truth, they have to address the truth, okay? Because they have to maintain their honor. So what we're doing is there's a lot of power in the things that I do because as long as we're speaking the truth to them, they haven't heard it. But the moment that they acknowledge that they've heard the truth, they have to address it, right? So that's